Our guest in this segment is the editor-in-chief of the Observer Weekly, Mr. Steve Pearson. Steve, good to see you.
Good morning. Lovely Monday morning, although, it always takes an adjustment to listen to that heavy metal hair music you have as the intro. That is a wake-up call.
Greta Van Fleet?
Yeah. So I think I like Mr. Stubblefield's suggestion, little mood music, brandy. Ease into this thing here.
Well, let me see what I can do for you.
All right.
We'll get you something on the way out that's kind of soft and casual.
Biscuit brandy.
Biscuit brandy. A new niche has been created.
I'm kind of lost. I would have took Steve Pearson as like more of a heavy metal kind of guy,
Yeah, you can see that.
Yeah, but you have the hairband, right?
Total.
Yeah. Peter Frampton look-alike, right? Yeah.
We got a lot to get to. We have fire and EMS. We've got data centers. We've got water lawsuits. We've got Marl. We've got Tricia Jackson back on the scene in Jefferson County politics as a Constitution Party candidate. And let us begin there. And I would also say we've got Dan Casto in the JCDA and his resignation from that. But let's start with Tricia Jackson back in the news.
Sure. That was, I guess, the Constitution Party had its convention last week, and we're starting to hear some news about some candidates. They've got a few delegate candidates here in the Eastern Panhandle, and then Tricia Jackson, who is the chair of that party. She was formerly a Republican and switched parties after she left the county commission, several years ago, and under trying circumstances, so to speak. So we'll see. It's now a four-way race for the county commission seat from Harpers Ferry. You've got Pasha Maji, commissioner, who's the incumbent. You've got a challenger on the Democratic Party, Lene Johnson.
Who's run before.
Yeah. Retired Air Force colonel, I believe. So, not different branch of the service, but,
We've had her on the show a couple times.
And then you have David Tabb, a, perennial candidate in Jefferson County, and now Miss Jackson has joined them. Mr. Tabb was in court on Thursday, for an issue with his campaign announcement and his residency, and so that's another issue that's complicating the.
What is? I presume a residency issue means someone's challenging whether he lives in the district.
The prosecuting attorney brought an indictment against him for false swearing. That he does. The indictment says that he claims he lives in Harpers Ferry, and prosecuting attorney
says no, you don't.
Thinks otherwise. So it's scheduled for trial in the fall.
He's had a relatively antagonistic relationship with county politics over the years.
Yes, he has.
One could say.
Yes.
Yeah. So
a lot of it discussing or focusing on the transparency or lack thereof on the county commission, which is what Mr. Casto was bringing up last week.
Let's transition into that too, because this brings up Pasha Majdi once again. And it would seem to me that the Jackson entry into the county commission race would affect him the most as the Republican and the conservative Republican in the race.
I think if we were going to the prediction markets, that would be the bet I would place. Yeah.
Yeah, let's go to Dan Casto. I don't know if you heard his appearance on the show.
I did. I listened to it. He threw out some pretty serious allegations of behavior of the county commission. And, I have to take Mr. Casto at his word. I mean, he's very well connected in the county. As he said, he was nominated for his role on the Development Authority by all of the commissioners. He was actually nominated to be president of the Development Authority. It was a tie vote between him and Todd Wilt, and they went. After the second round, it was Commissioner Maji that switched his vote to vote for Mr. Wilt. So Mr. Wilt is the chair. Dan Casto was the vice chair of the Development Authority. So certainly someone who knows what he's talking about vis-a-vis the county commission and the Development Authority. And but at the same time, he also threatened legal action against the county commission over an appointment on the planning commission. And I did get a copy of that letter. I don't believe any lawsuit was actually filed, but he did make the intention clear and ask for all records to be preserved. So the county commission, I mean, that is a legitimate question. If you have someone who's sitting on a county board who's actually threatening to sue the county, it raises a question of, can they continue to serve the county, because that's by its definition adversarial. But I do have to say, what Mr. Casto laid out in terms of that there were the county commissioners communicating, I believe communicating with phone, via text, not necessarily meeting, but certainly what he I think was trying to describe as a violation of the Open Governmental Meetings Act. I have to say that I have seen behavior that raises questions when you're sitting there in a county meeting and a complicated question comes up and there's very little discussion and they vote unanimously to approve something. It makes you wonder, how is it that 5 people are so aligned on issues? And just one example that stood in out in my mind. Several months ago, the sheriff came in and they had switched from buying equipment to leasing equipment, and they'd forgotten to include the fit out of the cruisers in the lease. So, the radios, the light bars, whatever it was, and so he needed more money because just getting a vehicle with no lights or no radio doesn't really work for the sheriff. And they grilled him and up and down and said, "Well, come back. We need more information," and send him away. And the vehicles are literally sitting, at the dealership, ready to go into service. In the same meeting, the county administrator and the CFO came in with a $800,000 budget revision. And this was a few months after the budget had been passed, and it's like, but there was no discussion. It was just, and there was no real detail in the packet, and there was no questions about, well, is this a recurring thing? Does this affect the budget that we've just voted on for next year? Do we have to be concerned about where we're getting this money from? It was just passed, and that was it. And I thought, well, that's a lot of money, to be just passed very quickly for a commission that says they're all fiscal conservatives. I mean, I would generally expect a fiscally conservative Republican to be probing a little bit about why we're spending this money, what the implications are, what this means for the following year. So little things like that and other things. It's a pattern that would raise questions to the outside advisor. And then when you have someone like Mr. Casto, who's clearly got a close relationship, you start to say, well, that's concerning. And I think that's something the county commission is going to have to address in a more proactive. I mean, sometimes the best medicine is to, be overly cautious and overly communicative.
Bill?
Yeah, another point that Casco mentioned that I found to be kind of disarming was that the executive director of the Development Authority, JCDA, reports to the county commission as opposed to reporting to the board. That's different than anything I've ever seen before. And it calls into question, why is there a Development Authority board of directors? Because their principal job is to work with the executive director of the Development Authority. If they don't have any real control over the executive director, the county commission does. What is the role of the Development Authority?
I have to agree with Mr. Castle on that. It's not clear at this point what the mission of the Jefferson County Development Authority is. That JCDA, but for short. We like acronyms over there. I think it's just our proximity to Washington D.C. But it goes back to there's competing visions in Jefferson County about growth and development. And unlike in Berkeley County or other counties, where there seems to be more alignment, between the county commission and the development authority and the executive director, the Jefferson County has, as you've mentioned, many times over the years, ever since I've known you, that Jefferson County has struggles with what it wants to be when it grows up. and how this growth is going to take place.
Let me interrupt
Yeah.
very quickly. And one of the advantages of a development authority that can literally work independent is a different contribution of intellectual properties. So you're not necessarily in sync. You have two different paths, if you will, and Berkeley County negotiates, maneuvers that very, very, very well, and they do talk among the two entities, but they're not necessarily in lockstep every sort of the way. But the end product, everybody benefits from these two independent thoughts. Now in Jefferson County, you've lost one half that equation. You've got everything defaulted to one body, and that's the county commission, and the development authority has been neutered, its voice has been neutered.
Yeah, and I can't, the question is whether it has been neutered or whether it's self-destructed too, or whether it was a combination of both. Because if you go back, several years, there's been a lot of turnover on the development authority. The county just recently went through its comprehensive plan, and there wasn't a real, tight integration across the different towns, cities, and the development authority in that. It was really focused on, it was a county centric, document. There were opportunities maybe missed to do what you were describing there that they've got in Berkeley County, and then earlier this year, they fired everybody that was on the board, in the county commission. Again, to what Mr. Casta was saying, they stocked it with, people that they thought would be, doing what they want. The county commission wanted them to do, and what they gave them was a really brief mission. They gave them 3 bullet points. It was agritourism, sports complex, and smart manufacturing. And I'm not sure what the actual order was, but it was not what you would consider like a strategic vision, right? These are the core, essential, attributes and advantages of Jefferson County, and here's, where we see ourselves. It was like, no, we've got these 3 projects you want to work on. So it was right there. That was a sort of a diminishment of the role of the development authority. It didn't say, come back and tell us, what you think we should be doing, what our opportunities are. And then the development authority itself had a strategic plan that was developed several years ago, but really it sort of dissipated and it's expired, and they talked about redoing it last year, it didn't do it, so they're still talking about a strategic plan for the development authority. So it's just kind of sitting there, one could say maybe spinning its wheels, and I think that's what
exactly
Mr. Casta was kind of saying.
Well, more than that, any real authority, any real influence has been pulled out from under them.
Yeah.
So it appears to me, from what Costco said and others I've heard, is that the power base has shifted strictly to the county commission, that all the decision for development authority or development in the county is rested under the vestiges of the county commission, and the development authority is just a shadow, if you will, without any real influence or contribution.
Well, and I think, when you go back to the budget that Mr. Castro mentioned, and he talked about the county administrator Eddie Benitez sort of laying it out. It's like, well, look, you guys don't have any revenue, we may need to cut you. I was there at that meeting,
yeah.
And listened to that, and it was very clear. Berkeley County, you've got revenue. You have the county development authority has a rental facility, where they're renting space, so it actually funds a significant. But the county still puts money into it.
No, they don't, not anymore.
Yeah, well, they did.
They
initially,
did for a
right,
long time, but the development authority has weaned itself from
right.
the counties.
Now, in a lot of counties, it's more of a mix. I mean, you don't have. Berkeley's more of an outlier, I think, in that regard, where they can self-fund their development authority. But with Jefferson, it was $300,000 to $400,000 a year going to this entity. And this goes back here. I mean, when they started, they acquired the property for the business park. You needed someone to manage that. That park took forever to sell through. They finally sold everything except the last lot, which they own. But it's still, they're transitioning the management, but it doesn't really have a they haven't decided they need more of a business park. The business park isn't really full. I mean, the lots are sold. There's some big businesses in there. There's some smaller businesses in there, but it's there's lots for sale. There's lots for sale around the business park. So it's an open question. Does the county need another business park? Could it do something with another business park? Is there demand there for it? So yeah, the Development Authority has been in search of a mission for many, many years, and I can't fault the county. I mean, doing what they created was an Office of Economic Development, and that's what Darrell Coles reports into Roger Goodwin, the county engineer, and the goal there was to facilitate, be a point of contact if a commercial enterprise business is coming in. Okay, here's somebody like an ombudsman who can work with the engineering, planning, zoning, what health department, whatever. And then provide support for this Development Authority. But the Development Authority was very clearly second fiddle.
Mike Mood this morning pointed out, Commissioner Mike Mood, that the JCDA had been operating at a loss. They weren't generating revenue to support themselves. And he said basically all they'd managed to do was sell properties for less than what they owed on them and hope that the state would bail them out, which the state declined to do. So it was time to build it up and start over.
This whole thing, and but again, remember the Development Authority
and
Business Park was a creature of the county commission.
When they brought in Rockwell and there was blowback, pretty much everybody who was in charge of that from the JCDA ran for the hills.
But it's interesting because Rockwell wasn't in the business park.
Mm-hmm.
And so it had nothing to do with the success or failure of the business park.
But under the Development Authority was a creature. The Rockwell was a creature of the Development Authority.
Actually, it was a conduit. Because the Rockwell was a state project, and the Development. I think it's overstating the role of the Development Authority. I mean, you need like a building commission.
Mm-hmm.
You need certain legal structures to do things, and the Development Authority was going to handle the pilot. So the state actually owns that land and equipment now. So the state basically just went around the Development Authority to take care of it.
I don't want to switch to a new subject entirely till we take the half-hour break, but I want to get to the open meeting laws, Bill, because as a president of the county commission,
Mm-hmm.
you had to become very familiar with these. So what is permissible when it comes to three commissioners communicating that would not violate an open meetings law, and what is not?
You can get together as long as business of the county is not discussed and a course of action decided. It's all the county commissioners are an easy target. We used to get together for lunch, and we were accused of violating the open business business law, open meeting law. But yet we took a lot of precaution of never discussing county business, and we never did. We were very conscious of that prohibition, and we abided by it. But it's probably in some views of folks' minds a gray area, but you can get together as long as you do not discuss county business that leads to a decision.
But if the three of us, so you, me,
Yeah.
and Alonzo are county commissioners, and I call up Alonzo and I said, I got this project coming along. I think this is the way we should vote on it. And then Alonzo calls you and I said, I was just talking to Steve, and this is the way we think. Is that a violation?
That, to me, in my view, that is a violation, and that is a commonly suggested workaround. I think that's a true violation. I think the open meeting law has a real purpose, and that is to air all the considerations to the public. And I know when I was on county commission, I think the subsequent did the same thing. I have great faith in Eddie and Steve and the others. They do just that. They do not make behind doors agreement via this phone line or via sitting around together.
I think it's colloquially known as a daisy chain.
Yes.
Right.
Yes, it is. But again, to answer Steve's question, to me that would be a clear violation.
But that is essentially what Casto on Thursday was
that's what I'm
implying
saying.
was going on. So you're saying if that is indeed going on, that is a violation.
Yeah, in my view, if
Is it an actual violation or kind of an implied violation?
Well, it depends upon if they're doing it to circumvent a discussion in the meeting. That's a direct violation. And what Dan was saying, implying that the purpose was to circumvent an open discussion, or a discussion in an open meeting.
Well, let me ask you this, Steve. Seeing Dan's comments, were there anything that gave you an indication that he was particularly unhappy, like during the development authority meetings? Because he seems like somebody that's super knowledgeable about development. He understands, the sequencing, bringing in the utilities, and he's worked on major projects before. So was there any indication that the development authority being inert or just having its complications, that he would kind of diverge, or do you think that there's something else going on?
No, again, he was the vice chair, and I think, when you get to any body like that, you have certain members that are more active. They're the ones making the motions, and you have others that are, hanging back. Mr. Casto was really front and center, in terms of, moving that body. Typically, you would expect him to make the motions, and that's often the times what happens. So, I don't get the sense that he was feeling that he was frustrated, in the development authority. I think what he was expressing, that he was like frustrating with the development authority as a whole. It just really wasn't, providing a purpose.
Steve, stay where you are.
All right.
Through the break, we'll have a full hour with Steve Pearson, editor-in-chief of the Observer Weekly. Steve Pearson is our guest. He is editor-in-chief of the Observer Weekly. We have with us in studio Mr. Bill Stubblefield.
Good morning, Rob.
Mr. Alonzo Perry.
Good morning.
And lots to get to in Jefferson County. I wanted, if you could, Steve, an update on the water bottling plant there. I know there's been at least something that occurred in the last couple of months as this case moves forward.
Yeah. So real quickly, it was appealed. The company was denied its permit by the Planning Commission. Went to Circuit Court. Circuit Court affirmed the Planning Commission's right to deny the permit or the plan. The company Sidewinder appealed that to the Supreme Court of West Virginia. Supreme Court of West Virginia set out a schedule where, I think it was in April, the company filed its brief. The County Planning Commission filed its response by June 1, and then there were a couple of what they call Friends of the Court briefs. The Jefferson County Foundation and the surrounding landowners filed a support in support of the Planning Commission, and the Preservation Alliance of West Virginia and National Preservation Trust, or National Trust for Preservation, they also filed a Friend of the Court brief. And their brief was about the irreparable harm that running a pipeline through the village of Middleway would do to the historic character of that. So the company has until, I think it was July 1, to file its response to the response, and then the Supreme Court, which is now on break, will decide in the fall what they do next. Do they hear it for oral argument in the fall? Do they wait till the next spring? Do they just decide on the record? So that's where it is right now. So it's like watching ice melt. Yeah.
And it'll be interesting. We've gone
Interesting choice, because the water involvement here. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, we've gone from a very conservative court to one that's considered more moderate. See how they.
Yeah, and it was interesting because there was a case that they decided in the intermediate court in Weirton BZA versus a gas company, and they upheld Weirton's planning authority and zoning regulations over state regulation. They said basically that since the zoning is created by the state, it's authorized by the state, and it's an equal standing for state legislation. So it's not that one state law preempts another state law.
Sidewinder, is that still the name everything is under here?
That's the name that the case was filed under. They created another entity called Valor Reserve. It's another LLC, yes. And unclear what that was intended to do, or they did a little splash at the State Chamber of Commerce. Again, sorry, but I think until this lawsuit is resolved, I don't know that they haven't made any other announcements or news about it.
They seem to be pretty motivated because the amount of money that they put into this project to this point to keep this going. If they don't get the answer that they want from the state Supreme Court, do you anticipate it would go through federal chains?
I have no idea.
Have you had any communications with anybody from Sidewinder in the last six months maybe.
No, as I said, once they're filing briefs, it's all quiet. There's really no reason, no advantage that they would want to say anything to anybody.
Steve, after following Rockwall, there was some criticism that Jefferson County was a non-friendly business county. Will this lawsuit against Sidewinder, is that going to enhance that impression?
I have a hard time, getting inside the mind of any business. I was at the ribbon cutting for Wawa, for example. And, the way that works is you have a real estate development company that buys the land, sites it, and then they, bring in the retail company. And I spoke to those guys, and they were all, it's a great place to do business. We're happy. We just looked at the numbers, and the numbers worked for Wawa. There was, it's like a progression. You got your Dollar Generals. You find them everywhere, and then you've got your Sheetz and your Chipotle's, and it all is based on the amount of traffic that is going by a specific location. And they apparently that corner there in Ranson either hit or is projected to hit the number in a reasonable time frame, and the numbers worked. So when different types of businesses have different criteria. Something like a Rockwool, that's a bigger, upfront investment. Yeah, they might be looking for more friendlier environment, but it's I don't know that Fortune 500, Fortune 1000, Fortune 5,000 companies. I don't think they run screaming to the hills because whether a county commissioner is friendly or unfriendly. They're much more analytical. And they've got lawyers and accountants that can help them, overcome these things, especially the bigger companies.
Yeah, they are. I was very much involved with Macy's when Macy's came in, and you're right. They are analytical. They look at the numbers. However, there are a lot of other areas that also are very competitive as well. So analytics. If they do not meet up certain standards, they're off the table. But a lot of groups meet up certain standards. So then it becomes the intangibles.
Right.
And Macy's coming here was as much as anything on intangibles.
And then but you also have transportation. When you ask these companies what drives them, workforce. Do they have access to a good workforce? Do they have transportation? Do they have the utilities? And that's power and water. And I think one of the challenges that Jefferson County has, we don't have the interstate. And then the workforce, isn't here either. And it's a problem for West Virginia as a whole.
And those all those I would consider under analytics. They would all those considerations.
Right. Yeah. Right. But I think Jefferson County, and that goes back to something I wrote about back in December. When you look at Jefferson County. And there's a sort of you want to compare it to Berkeley, right? Because we're right next door. But I used the example of it's two brothers, right? You got the 6'6" brother who can play basketball, and then you've got the 5'4" brother who's a good wrestler. You can't say that they're the same. They're both they're competing in different things. So Berkeley County, about 140,000 people as of the estimates for 2025. Jefferson County, 63,000. Over the last 15 years, Berkeley's grown 30%. Jefferson County's grown 10%. So Jefferson County says, well, we're growing really fast. But then when you look over to Berkeley, that's fast growth. And, the scale of things, when companies, whether it's, commercial, retail focused or, larger scale industrial, they're going to look at these things and Berkeley's always going to come out a little bit ahead because it's when if you're coming down 81, you're going to be going through Berkeley County to get to Jefferson, And when you're looking at a commercial, like how many people I'm going to be serving, same thing. Well, there's always going to be where am I going to put my next store? Well, I've got twice as many people in Berkeley, and it's growing faster, so I'm going to make more money there than in Jefferson.
You mentioned 81, but you also have the railroad, and you also have the airport.
Right. Yeah. So, as I said, it's a lot of built-in advantages, and I think one of the challenges that Jefferson has to do, and this goes back to the conversations we were having about the Development Authority, is you can't take the same playbook that Berkeley has and rerun it on a smaller scale for Jefferson. It's just not going to work.
Let's talk power lines before we run out of time here, Steve.
Okay.
Let's get into it. What do you know now?
Let's get plugged in.
What's the yes, sir. Splash.
No, don't mix those two. You know, they're very, very bad.
Bad idea.
Right now, going back a couple years ago, there was a project called MARL, and MARL got split into two projects.
Do you know what MARL stands for?
Yeah, Mid-Atlantic Resiliency Link.
Thank you.
That came up. I'm guessing Madison Avenue. You know, let's make something that people don't want and give it a nice name. You know, MARL. You know, it sounds like it should be riding in like on a cowboy. You know, with a cowboy hat and all that. So that is a project to basically take an existing power line, you know, and upgrade it, add another bigger line on top of it. So it'll go from those sort of like wooden, look like overgrown telephone poles that you see in the streets, you know, together. It'll be a 150, 180 foot tall steel, you know, monopole. So about, you know, 4 times the height, carrying these two lines in the existing right of way. And that'll run along, if in southern part of the county, there's a very wide steel framed power line. That's a Dominion power line coming in from Mount Storm. So those two will be running together. And MARL takes it from the Mount Storm area into just outside of Winchester, where there's a new substation. And then the First Energy portion of that is called Gore, Dobbs, Goose Creek. And they only could come up with GDGC, which, you know, I guess they gave up on that one. And that's going to take it through Jefferson County back into Virginia and connect it over into Loudoun County, which is where they wanted the power for the data centers again. So it's all plugs back in. NextEra, which is a company doing the MARL, has gone to the PSC. They filed their case. County commissions in Hardy, Mineral, Preston, and Mon have filed, to be interveners in that. First Energy has not yet filed its application with PSC. First Energy's been like very slow rolling its part of the project. Presumably because it's in an existing right of way and they don't think they're going to need to do a lot because they got to buy a couple extra parcels or through eminent domain or through negotiating with the landowners, but they're basically going to be working within their existing right of way. Now there are some questions about whether the right of way easements they have allow for that, or there's, were they specific to that existing power line, or does it allow any power line? So that's something that'll probably get litigated. But again, until they go to the PSC, there's no place for anybody to even litigate. So I believe there is a public group that is meeting in the next week or two in the Ranson Civic Center, Jefferson County Vault. They are a local group that is organizing citizens who are concerned about it. So then after that, I'll just get real quick, there's another line that was approved in 2024, much bigger, 760 kilovolt, which is, these things get really, really big. And that is in the early stages, and that was just announced. And that is stretching from Pennsylvania, again, all the way through into Maryland to connect up with Loudoun County. And right now, that is an area of, we don't know where that line will go. It could go anywhere in Jefferson County. I mean, there's sort of a presumption that it might go next to the existing lines, but there's no real reason that should be true, because what happens is you got to get a straight line, 200 feet wide, and you can't cross the existing line, and you want to minimize what you're disrupting. You don't want to go across parks and cemeteries and lots of existing housing. So this new one may have to zig and zag because there's a lot more development since those other lines were put in.
Is the right-of-way 100 feet on either side of the line? Is that the deal?
Yeah, for the 765, because it's a bigger line, the wires have to be further apart so they don't make contact or cause interference.
Steve, sticking with MARLs, is the only issue the right-of-way? Is rate impact on rates, is that an issue, or the other secondary issues?
Well,
or is it strictly right away?
Rate impacts are always an issue, but I won't even begin to claim that I understand how that affects it, because we pay for everything somehow, right? There is no free lunch. So whether it's power plants that aren't being fully utilized, whether it's power lines, infrastructure, there's this very complicated formula when these projects are proposed to the grid, and they say, well, this company you pay 2% of it, this company you pay 30%, this company you pay 4%, and it's all based on a projection of usage. So if that usage varies, then some people are paying more, some people are paying less as well. So
Would it be fair to say, if the impact on rates was not an issue, that as you described, that the right of way was a major consideration? If the bulk of the right of way has already been resolved, what is the concern to West Virginia residents?
well, this is a case where most people are not necessarily affected by it, but the people that are very, very significantly affected by it. So if you have a house and you've got a relatively small, let's say you've got a 30-foot pole behind your house, right? It's sort of wood, it sort of blends in. If now you've got 150, bright orange, rusted, steel tower, that's over your house, that's going to affect you. And, the electromagnetic interference, again, whether there's any health or not, but just your computers, your electronics, they're affected as well.
Yeah, I appreciate all that, and I agree with all that. But if that is a very, very small amount, very small impact, then I wonder how that's going to play into the PSC decision making.
The PSC is not in the habit of denying these types of projects anyway. But there is mitigation, and there's also the question of fair compensation. And that rises in eminent domain cases a lot. Well, your property isn't worth much. Well, that's because you put a power line on it.
That'll do it every time. Alonzo.
So I think people are also concerned that they don't feel like West Virginia is getting the benefit. They see us as a pass-through. But I had to ask, are there going to be substations along the route?
That's a really good question, because no. In these lines that are being built now, there is no takeoff for Jefferson County, and that's something that the county commission raised. They came out and said, well, we're against these things, but if you were to put a substation so we could power a data center, well, then we might be for these things.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the larger line that was just announced. There's I think that's a substation in Hardy County, and then one only in Maryland. And so, these things just fly over. This is like, you're going to give you airport service, but, you got to go to Dulles, right? So, well, no, we want an airport here. No, I'll just watch the planes fly over. Yeah.
That takes us to Summit Point. And what is the potential location for a data center in Jefferson County?
There was a company that came to the Charlestown Utility Board, again, CTUB, another one of those acronyms, and said, hey, we just bought 230 acres. We want to talk about getting water. And they said, well, the reason we got this property is because there's power lines right overhead. And, this goes back to the question Alonzo was asking. First Energy isn't going to drop in, a substation just because, but a industrial user like a data center will come in and say, well, okay, what's it cost to put in a substation here? $25 million? All right, well, the money's in the bank, go for it. And so I presume the typical pattern, if they're following it, is they are doing a load study right now with First Energy. They've contacted CTUB to say, well, if we're doing this, here's the water that we're going to need. And they've been having several discussions from what the general manager has told me. So again, is this project coming in, this year? No. Could they be making, more announcements next year? Likely. And that's what I would expect, is it'll firm up. You do all this stuff. I mean, First Energy may come back and say, sorry, it's going to take 10 years for you to get energy. I mean, that's the problem that the steel mill, ran into with gas. They wanted to have natural gas, and the gas company said, well, not this decade. So they're dropping a power line, from Beddington up to the steel plant. It's going to be running on electricity. So the most likely there'll be more, because when you look at that area of Summit Point, the land is flat. There is the power line we talked about. There's the new power line, the 765, which most likely, because that is wide open and undeveloped, that's the most likely part of Jefferson County where it'll come through. So you got two power lines that potentially could be tapped into. That's a lot of power to take into that. It's also, there's the new substation on one of the lines that's going in just across the border in Frederick County, and not too far to take a smaller line, from outside of Winchester, north of Winchester, over into the southern part of Jefferson County. Because when you look at where Summit Point is, it's just as close to Winchester as it is to Charlestown. And when you get outside of the city, I mean, if you're looking for like, and this is an issue that came up with when they were talking about the economic development and where the impact that Summit Point has on Jefferson County. Like most of the hotels, like for these events, people go to Winchester because there's more of them down there, and they're closer than actually going through Charlestown to the other side. So the big unknown is water, but at the scale and investment that these things have, laying a pipeline for 10 miles is not a problem for them.
Well, that was a lot of suspicions when Sidewinder got involved with the water plant, was that this would ultimately become a data center. That doesn't appear to be the case.
In Middleway you're talking
about. Yeah, but that was what a lot of fears were.
Actually, I think that if you talk to some of the folks in Middleway, they would have rather had a data center on that facility than
certainly a lot less trucks coming.
Well, a lot
through.
less trucks, right? But I don't know that. I mean, it may still be. I mean, that's always the conundrum when you're looking at what you use your land for, right? If you're farming, it's got a certain value. If you're selling it for houses, it's got a certain value. If you sell it for commercial property because you're on a highway. Data centers have now made land that wasn't really, highly valued, very valuable. Because again, you've got a power line. It's like that was kind of a detraction. Now, if you got a power line, well, you got the most valuable land in the county.
Any idea what like 15 seconds what the percentage turnout was in the Ranson city elections?
It was under 5%.
Under 5%.
Under 5%.
Final minute with Steve Pearson coming up after this.